Well, let me describe a little bit about Tribal Edge, just so you know where you're at and have a better sense of background and who I am, and can therefore hopefully trust your experience more. Okay, so how did Tribal Edge happen? Just backstory real quick. I grew up here, born and raised, and was just kind of a feral kid running around in the woods most of my life. Got into martial arts and health and primitive skills and all that stuff. Found a book when I was 14. A friend of a friend gave me, well, I found two books. One was Tarzan, which was formative. It's important. And one was called The Tracker, which is a story about my teacher's story, basically. Are you familiar with Tom Brown Jr. or The Tracker? Okay. So, there's stories within stories here. Do you like stories?
Mm-hmm.
So, and stories are an important part of all of this. The story making, the storying that we do is an important piece. So, basically these two books entered my life at a really formative time when I was not understanding what I was up to, not understanding my passions, I should say. I mean, I love them, they're passions, that's natural, but I didn't see how they fit the world that I lived in, and which was kind of a fairly conservative, traditional, Christian home, going to school, all that stuff, right? And my interests were like, I wanted to be a ninja, I wanted to I wanted to go live in the woods and all these things. I wanted to be Tarzan. And it caused me to, I wouldn't say delay my growing up, but I certainly didn't follow a traditional path. Went to college a little bit for like a year. No, traditional learning, that methodology just didn't really work for me. So I went adventuring, traveling, and really got into training in different things. But when I was 14, I found this book called The Tracker, which was the story of now my teacher, Tom Brown Jr., who is a tracker, kind of world-renowned survival instructor and stuff back east in New Jersey of all places.
Right.
So I live in the purity of the wild, and he's in New Jersey. Yeah, exactly. But he's out in the Pine Barrens, so there actually is quite a bit of wilderness there. It's kind of amazing. It's very different, but I don't know if you've been over there. You're from New York, right?
Yeah, I didn't spend a ton of time in Jersey.
Yeah, I don't blame you. So that's where Tom grew up, and he encountered, when he was 7 years old, his story goes, he encountered an Apache elder, who basically just kind of emerged out of the wilderness after wandering for about 60 years. And this man his name was Stalking Wolf, and he was one of the few remaining, this is back in the 50s, Tom's 71 now, so this is a while ago. But back in those days, so Stalking Wolf was born in 1889, and he had a really intensive traditional upbringing with his people, and then was kind of found to be gifted in a lot of areas, even amongst his people, and the Apaches are kind of known for their ruggedness, resilience, awareness. Take Geronimo never being found, and being chased around the countryside for forever with a group of people, and only being caught when he gave himself up. So these are people that could live in very harsh environments as one with the earth without a lot of challenge. So kind of like the deer and the animals around them. So So anyway, Stalking Wolf, when he was about 20, left his tribe, his own people, who had decided to disappear into the wild because people were getting slaughtered and being put on reservations and stuff. And they were just like, yeah, no, we're out, and just disappeared, which was part of their skill set, to become invisible on the landscape. I mean, they could actually live like right here and we would have no idea, like that invisible. Everything from their fires to how they gathered food and their shelters and everything was just like super strategically camouflaged and just amazing. So anyway, so coming from that, being like, that's how you live, that's how Stalking Wolf grew up. And then he wandered North and South America on foot, just walked, and lived from place to place. He was seeking out, well, it was obvious that times were changing and elders were being lost, and the future was uncertain. There was a alien invasion on the land, which was us, and so it was a challenging, a hard time, and civilization was starting to emerge, as far as the Industrial Revolution, what it looks like now. Just really rapid change was going on. And so Stalking Wolf was kind of dodging that and also trying to find these elders who were still alive anywhere he could find them from any tribe to learn more, because part of his calling was to gather and preserve the physical skills of living with the earth, and also the, what we might call, spiritual or philosophical skills of just that. So that was his vision, and so he wandered finding teachers, either in, they'd teach him a certain way that they made a basket or a bow or something in that culture, and then the ceremonies that went with that, and then he just devoured and gathered as much of this knowledge as he could before it was gone, because these elders were fading out, and the knowledge was going with them. And so that was his mission, and he did that for 63 years. He wandered, and which is really ridiculous if you think about it. That's a phenomenal life. And he wandered down into South America, up into northern Canada, Alaska, and consequently found himself at 87, I think, very, having this pretty incredible life, a overwhelming amount of knowledge that he's practiced and preserved, and really nowhere to transmit it, no students, which was also part of his vision. So he was on the East Coast. He was in the Pine Barrens at the time when he met Tom Brown, who was 7 years old. Tom's just a ordinary, piney, white guy hick, or was, until he met Stalking Wolf, who he also called grandfather, which was because he was his best friend's grandfather, and also that was the title, or then in the Apache culture, that was kind of what you called people that were older than you, like teachers, kind of like we say sensei, or sifu, right? Means father. So Tom began to learn from grandfather everything he could, and Stalking Wolf began to download his accumulated knowledge on Tom, and for about 11 years they had that relationship, kind of teacher, mentor, student, and Tom learned in a really traditional way, a profound body of knowledge, and part of his vision was to write books and to teach. And so he started a school in '79, teaching, and has still teaching. And so I got reading one of his books and was like, what is this? And went over and discovered he had the school, and in my early 20s went over there and started training training with him, and that has changed my life. And so I bring that up because that's a huge part of the background of how this came into being, how we got here. It doesn't stop there, but it certainly, I would say, started there. So the skills and the philosophy of living with the earth and all that stuff, that aspect of Tribal Edge, which is kind of the foundation, came from that lineage, that teaching. And it takes a while to get a sense of that and to have that conveyed, but it eventually, it's very natural. It's very much like kind of going home kind of feeling was for me. And I try to nurture that and pass that on as the best I can. And I always like to pay respects to that story and that lineage. So, but beyond that, that's certainly a huge influence, and as is the martial arts path for me personally, and the healing path, and kind of these different elements that all kind of fused together and became one thing in my mind that is what I try to share now. And that's expressed in our core curriculum, which is where you are right now. So the core curriculum is a series of 12 classes. I don't know if you looked on the website much.
A little bit.
Okay. So, and I just want to give you a sense of where this class is, because it's in a journey of classes. So it also stands alone. It's also just something like, here you go. If I never see you again, hopefully this will be useful. But it's part of a journey, and that's the part I want to explain. So the journey follows the seasons, follows the times of year, and that's deliberate. It's actually embedded in the teachings in a way. So our journey basically starts in the springtime, and it starts with our tracking class. And tracking is a universal language, basically. It's a way of making sense of interpreting and observing the world around you. So it's something we all do. You do it as a human, but it's also a skill that you can do better as a human. So typically, it's thought of as looking at the footprints and disturbances in the ground, which is what it is. But it's also more than that. It's looking at all the interrelated aspects, kind of this complex web of life and how that all works together. So there's like an ecology framework with it. It's a really deep science and art and philosophy. And so that's where it starts. And then it's starting to rain a little bit, so I don't know if this will work on here, but draw this little map for you, and then we'll get rolling on the zone a little more. Yeah. Okay. Maybe it's just that marker. Okay, so I'm going to call that kind of the 4 seasons, 4 directions. So tracking, we start over here. And the tracking skills lead to, in the summertime, a course called Survival, which is really just the tools and skills of living directly with the earth, making fire from friction, shelter, finding water, food, and the basics, super fundamental. How to be here. And without tracking, it's really hard to survive, because tracking is how you gather your information. It tells you where the good shelter is and where the food is, and right? So it's all kind of starts to connect already. This leads to another kind of category, but it's a class we call healing. I'm not going to go super deep into these because then I'm just teaching these classes, but the healing class is connected to the tracking class in a way too, because it's a lot about awareness and self-awareness and holistic thinking and holistic healing. And once healing comes up as it's also related to survival. Survival is just being here. Healing is kind of this transformational process of allowing you to keep being here. It's an important part of our evolution, you know. And then a class we call combat, which is the skills of protecting life, basically. So part of survival, certainly, right? Got to be here. And so those 4 elements, though, it's interesting, I keep trying to perfect this and find more. I would improve it I have improved it over the years, but I keep trying to find better expressions, and I just can't so far. Of the 4 core life skills, life supporting skills that we need to be here as humans, right? Now, you could say, well, what about, this and that? And the thing is, they all kind of fit into, I just make them fit. So they're still here today. I mean, we're still doing them, and this is important too. I want to connect this to your life right now, not just let it be like, oh, if everything was ideal and we lived with the land, I would do this. It's like, it's not that. You are surviving right now, doing great. Shelter, water, fire, food, taken care of, right? It looks a little different. It's not like you're out here running around in a loincloth, but so our survival needs are taken care of today with, stores and builders and things that are working at that level. Our tracking needs are taken care of by information gatherers, and that would look like maybe, well, nowadays it's kind of like journalists and people that are, and scientists, stuff like that, right?
The weatherman.
The weatherman, yeah, right. Healing, obviously we have a huge infrastructure covering all of that, right? From alternative medicine to allopathic medicine, hospitals, emergency medicine. And combat would be military, law enforcement, these safety and security focused infrastructure. So it's all still here. It's just very much, it's a lot more complex. When you just walk out there, it's like it gets really simple. Not easy, but simple. It's really direct. So that's our basic training. And spring, summer, fall, winter. And then, but we're not in any of those classes, so what else is there? So I call these the skill series, or the science. It's like the mechanics classes, these are like the hard skills. But there's another layer of skills out here, which is called, so we have the skills, and we have the I just call it the training series. Training meaning the journey of mastery, really. How to get good at stuff. Learning how to learn. Which is, immediately, if you get into tracking, you'll discover that one of the first things you run into is yourself. Because you either get frustrated with yourself, or you get bored, or you get overwhelmed, or you get excited. There's things that you're going to encounter right away that the only thing that's keeping you from understanding the world around you is yourself. I mean, the world is there to be understood to some degree. It's also a huge mystery, but if you lack the motivation, the persistence, basically the qualities that will allow you to get good at something, doesn't matter what it is, learning anything, you're just not going to get it. That's just how it works, right? So what I've really gotten into, and one of my favorite areas of this whole thing, is the training process. So it doesn't matter if you're in studying awareness and tracking, survival, healing, combat. There's a process at work behind those skills that we encounter right away. And so that's what, in the training series, is where we are now. So in this class I call The Path. It's a class connected to tracking, and it's a exploration of choice and your path, and kind of and your vision in a sense. So one of the practices we do out here is called the Vision Quest, and that is a old school transformational experience that helps you get clear about you and your life. And so it's really all about that. It's like, hey, who are you? What are you up to? You know, are you taking responsibility for your life? And what are you choosing? It's also in a kind of a metaphor in terms of a journey, because without a path, without a choice, then anything will do. You know, if you want to get good at something, you actually have to have kind of at least a goal or an idea of where you want to go. Otherwise, you just sit on the couch and play video games, because it doesn't matter what you do. I mean, unless video games is your goal, then there you go. So down here, I have another class connected to the path. It's the continuing story called The Tools. The Tools is referring to the practices of personal development and transformation, nature connection. There's a whole set of tools that I've been taught and also practiced that help generate the skills and the help transform you into the type of person that you need to be to get to get down the path. So, in other words, you can be excited about an adventure and like draw it out on the map and be like, yeah, I'm going to totally go do that. But if you don't know anything about it, and you don't know what equipment you need or how to prepare for that, you're not going. And if you do, you're going to suffer. You know, you're just going to have a terrible time. If you're going rock climbing and you don't know the first thing about gear, or you don't have a guide or any, it's like, yeah, don't go rock climbing. You know, maybe get the tools. So tools can include mentors and teaching and art forms and everything. Like all of that stuff is kind of considered the tools. So then we have a class called, I don't have a better name for this, I just call it The Way, which is really kind of referring to the working part of transformation. It's the work. It's the you want to go somewhere cool. Oh, you have all the shiny gear and tools. Awesome. Are you doing it? You know, it's like take a step and keep going. It's that kind of like it's the process of transformation itself, which is a whole. This is generally one of the big areas, because it's not too hard to make a choice and get inspired about something, and you can have all the shiny stuff, but this is really where the work happens. And it's interesting, 20% of this is probably the mechanics, like knowing what to do. 80% of it is the psychology. It's the personal work, not just external work. And finally, we have the zone. Here we are, which is in this series. So the zone refers to, in this sense, the kind of like the purpose or the reason we are on this journey of your life or whatever you're up to. It's like, and I don't mean like the outcome goal. I mean, it's the thing that we are so addicted to, all of us, that we keep coming back for more. So we're gonna talk about the zone and what that encompasses, but basically it's peak experiences. It's optimal experience, meaning it's two things. It's where we perform the best, but also feel the best, same time, which creates is a result of a crazy neurochemical cocktail that is extremely addictive. And so it's possible that the zone experience, flow experience, or being in the zone, is responsible for our survival, because it's so self-reinforcing. It's so addictive, in other words, that it causes people to want to do it all the time. It's self-reinforcing, right? It makes you want more. And it happens to make you addicted to where you're performing the best and feeling the best. Yeah, that sounds like a really good prescription for, I don't know, survival. Like, you're in your optimal state and you're performing the best. If you're going to survive, that's where it's going to be. It's not going to be when you're in some crappy state, and like, oh, I don't know, and all depressed and stuff. You're just going to get eaten by nature, absorbed. So the zone is kind of this result of the journey, but it's not a long-lasting result. It's not like you've arrived. It's not a destination at all. It's more of a phase in a process. It's elusive, and that's part of what we want to get into. And Alex kind of mentioned it in his check-in, wanting to be there more often, I think is what you said, man.
Yeah.
So it's also connected to combat, because in our training it just lines up in that area very well. In one of the places to, man, it's more than that. Certainly we encounter the zone state in martial arts training, but there's something about, it's kind of like the whole archetypical world of martial arts and being at that edge of life and death that literally and metaphorically is a place of transformation. So if you're going to change in some way, then some part of you is going to die. And if you can endure that, if you can get through that, you get the reward, you know. And so flow state is actually a kind of a streaming process of death and rebirth in a very small cycle, and we'll talk about that. So there is this kind of life and death aspect of it, and of course it's on all the ancient literature of, you know, martial arts. I don't know, I want to call it poetry almost. So, all right, one more. I'll just cover this real quick. One more series here to make the 12, and this class is called Know Thyself. In this series, I call it the Tribe series because it has a lot to do with being human and being human with other people. So, you know, being part of a community, being part of a tribe, really works good when you have people who are first within themselves, you know, first individuals, first people that know who they are. So before you put a bunch of people together, if you can have people that actually really know themselves well, you get a much different result than when you just have a bunch of people, just a big pile of people. So, so Know Thyself class, it also is a way of looking at tracking. It's like inner tracking in a sense, where all the tracking skills apply to self. It's very interesting. So then we have, what's that one called? Team dynamics. So this one's all about team and what happens when we bring individuals together into an actionable group. And then we have creating community. Just call it that, creating community, which is a larger kind of extension of, it's different than team, but how community forms, how do we maintain it, and how do we, you know, work together. This is in the survival realm too, by the way, because many hands make light work. It's the emergent synergy that happens when people come together constructively. And that's really mostly how we're talking about Thanksgiving address. That's mostly how we got here. It's not because we're just so smart and strong. It's because we figured out how to work together and help each other, and that got us through the hard times. It's amazing how quickly you can come up with a vaccine when the whole world is working on it, you know? It's like, and then finally, mentoring leadership is in this area. So this is all about leadership and the nature of influence and a process called mentoring. So there you go. That's the the map of our curriculum, just to give you a sense of where we're at today. We're in the training series, and we're kind of focusing on this elusive aspect of the zone that is part of every journey, which everyone here has experienced and experiences frequently, but maybe it's just not as obviously as you might think. And we want to see if, hey, maybe we can encounter those states more often, and use that to kind of leverage our lives in ways that we might be missing out on. So it goes like this. Spring, it starts with tracking, then it goes to the path, then it goes to know thyself, and then it goes to summertime. So
It's funny to be starting at the end.
Yeah, you're right at the end of the journey. Which it's an interesting place. So this class is also, I don't know, it's kind of one of the more subtle classes. So part of that's just the nature of the topic, but it's also for people that are going through this whole journey of training, that by the time they get there, there's a foundation kind of laid. But the cool thing is, even if you did it again, she's doing it again. I've had people who have taken classes 10 times, the same class. But not only is it because the class is always different, but it's you were different.
Right.
You ever go back to a book that you've read before and be like, oh my god, I didn't know I was in there? That kind of thing.
There's an awesome analogy in a book that I really got a lot out of that talks about like life as like summiting a peak of a mountain. Like you can't just go straight up, that would be too difficult, right? So you're like going in circles around.
Cool.
And so you reach this place and it looks like the exact same place you were however long ago, but you're slightly higher.
Yeah. That spiral, by the way, is exactly what I'm talking about. So there's a spiral happening so I have a program called The Journey, which is literally going through this with assistance and training in between. So every month we have the classes, and then we unpack it all month and train around it and stuff. So in that sense, people that have done that training, Lisa did it, you can go through it. I've had people do it several years, so they'll go through and it's the spiral.
Yeah.
And it just lays a foundation, and then next time you come around, you're looking at all these things differently, and you're in a different place. So a spiral is a much better analogy than a circle, because circle implies you're just starting over. And it's not so. You can't. So
Well, this is a spiral from the top view.
yeah, it is. Yep. So this is also an example of a holistic map. So one way to describe holistic is to look at something, any issue or any topic, from as many perspectives as possible and as many layers of depth as possible at the same time, maybe at the same time, but you're visiting all of those. And so this is an attempt to do that as well. So there's something, actually it's kind of right here, that all of this is talking about. And we're just looking at it from different angles, all the way through these different aspects of the same journey. And so whatever's here, and also these lines themselves imply the journey part, and that's that kind of connective, or those lines of relationship are really important as well. Looking at how these things, these skills and these teachings kind of fit within each other and inform each other and help each other. That's how also it can extend into your life, because you are doing this all the time. You're doing those basic skills. Now, it's a little bit different up there, a little bit more distorted, but it's still there. And so it's all the same journey. So you have plenty of experience to get a lot from this, just because you're human and you've been doing this. So nothing miraculously special going on, but there is a perspective being offered that will make what seems ordinary less ordinary. And that's really fun for me, is to play that game of like well, basically, kind of going into the next chunk, and if you guys need a break at some point, we're gonna move a little bit here and there, but this isn't a super active class. There will be some. I'm gonna kind of focus on martial arts because martial arts, and if you're interested, and that's a great vehicle for that stuff. So we'll do quite a bit of that. But also just need to talk and have a conversation, because some of this, much of what we do in this journey requires a different frame of thinking than, say, our traditional Western minds are used to. And so I like to take a little bit of time and let people encounter this and try to reveal it. And by the end of the day, it's kind of like there's this other kind of teaching that shows up, and by the end of the journey, man, it's really become familiar. But it's still mysterious, and so that's part of where I want to start on the content. Is I start all my classes, all of our training is kind of built on this assumption that everything is mystery. And so we could almost, I could almost say, I've been told, one student that came here quite a bit, she's like, this is a mystery school. I get what you're doing, you know. And that's those are, you know, a category of old traditional schools throughout the world. And it is, in a sense, because one of the things that's, one of the games you'll be invited to play, and I'm not saying any of this is the truth, by the way, like absolute, this isn't like, believe this, none of that. This is just take what you can, absorb what is useful, let go of the rest. Or put it over there so you can check it out or something. But not asking you to believe anything. I am going to ask you to try on a perspective and to play, basically. Think of it as a game. Games are fun. That's the other reason. It's like games can put us in flow state, and flow state is a powerful way to learn. It's way more powerful than just didactic, process. So everything is mystery is something that I have basically been influenced by from Stalking Wolf, I would say, is kind of the core of that. So, and I'm going to share something that you refer to as the wheel of knowledge to kind of start explaining that, but I mean it in two senses. So everything is mystery. I mean, it doesn't seem true because, I mean, you know you're here, and you know that that's a car and stuff, right? We know stuff. Come on, what do you mean everything's mystery? So certainly there's a part of the universe that we know nothing about. There's a huge aspect of the universe that is truly mysterious, and probably most of it, right? Physically, probably most of it, but also whatever else is happening. Consciousness, one of the only things we know is a thing, consciousness, because you're experiencing it, and that's how you experience everything, is one of the greatest mysteries as well, because they have no idea what it actually is and how it actually works, right? It's still a huge problem in terms of scientifically. So, and yet it's one of the only things we know is absolutely true, because here I am feeling it. I've been in places in my life where I'm just like, well, that's the only thing I can't doubt. Is, I mean, I'm experiencing doubt, So it's kind of a strange paradox. So there's all the unexplainable stuff. All the stuff is truly mystery as far as we're concerned. But then there's also all the stuff that we know, right? And I would challenge that. For example, there's a story of Stalking Wolf training Tom Brown, and they're in the Pine Barrens at Grandfather's camp, and Grandfather's like down this trail, and he's staring. This old man, right? He's old, like sage, like super wizard guy, amazing tracker who could, tell you that a fox was walking through the woods like 5 miles away, that kind of stuff, like crazy connected. Okay. Knew all the medicinal everything and had been living off the land purely for his whole life. And just had this presence of deep connection and mystery. But so he's standing there looking, staring a lot of attention into this little bush. And Tom being a student, Stalking Wolf also didn't teach directly like whiteboards and stuff. He taught by example and by old school kind of Karate Kid, if you remember that kind of. So he's standing there staring in this bush, and Tom's like, well, this must be important. What's he looking at? Something's got his attention. He's a master tracker. I'm going to go find out what it is. So he walks up slowly to not disturb it, and gets up to Grandfather, and he's like, looking at Grandfather, looking in the bush. And there's a robin sitting there in the bush. And Grandfather's just absorbed by this robin. And Tom's like, Grandfather's just a robin. What are you doing? And Grandfather looks at him with like these eyes that like pierce his soul, and it was like, just a robin, huh? He takes a stick, and it's sandy in the pine barren, so it's like this perfect sandscape, basically. It's really weird. Pine trees and sand. But he takes a stick, and in the sand, he draws the outline of the robin. The robin flies off. Draws the outline of the robin, kind of big. And then he asks Tom, he's like, what color are the secondary feathers on this robin? What color were its eyes? He's like, how many specks did it have on its left wing? And Tom's like, what? He was just like, no, it's just a robin, right? I know what a robin is. And Grandfather revealed to him that he had no idea what that thing was. He just had barely a very superficial representation in his mind of what this thing actually is. Not to mention its behavior, its connection to the things, right? All of this other stuff that just goes on and on and on. I like to use an example of a tree. We have a tree right here. So, okay, if I asked you to point at a tree, you'd probably look around and, yep, tree, right? So, a tree is not what we think. One of the things I do is I'm an arborist, so I've been working with trees for over half my life now. And the more I work with trees, the more I realize I don't know what they are. Like, they are staggeringly amazing creatures. Because, first of all, so if you look at a tree, so, if you were to like draw a tree on a notebook or something, you would probably limit it to like drawing, the ground, draw roughly the tree shape. There it is, cartoon version of a tree, right? But that thing, if it was just that thing, would die immediately because, oh yeah, forgot the root system. That's underground, can't see it. So then you draw the root system. Now you have basically a tree. It looks kind of weird because it's like this branchy thing with rooty thing, and it's just sitting there in space. That thing would die right away too. That can't exist. That's not a thing. Trees aren't able to be like that. Does that make sense? You can't just have a tree, in other words. Because tree has to be what? In soil. Has to be in the ground. So there's got to be at least, I don't know, the roots generally for most trees go about out to where the drip line is. The drip line is where the edge of the canopy is. So I'm under it right now. There's a line along in a big circle on the ground, which is where the root system lays. Between, an inch and 3 feet in the soil is basically where all of its roots are. This big mesh. And I'm standing on them right now. Right? And so I have to include a big chunk of soil in my imagination of tree that includes at least enough for the roots. Now we have the tree, right? Do we? Unfortunately, that thing would die right away. That can't exist either. You can't just have tree plus soil as tree. Okay? A tree, the system is the problem. It's a complex system. A tree is a system of flowing nutrients and energy. A tree exists, a tree is solidified sunshine because it absorbs that energy, transforms it into fuel, right, into food, and into structure. It sucks nutrients out of the soil, sucks water out of the soil. So we have to have water in this whole equation somewhere. In our imaginary tree example. So now we got like water in the ground maybe, or rain in our picture on our notebook, but also, crap, we gotta have clouds, you're gonna have rain, right? So now we have the clouds, which don't move around and don't even form without the sun. Well, we had the sun anyway, which is 93 million miles away from the tree. Okay, so this thing is getting really weird, whatever the heck it is. This thing that we call a tree. So it's now including a star that's like 93 million miles away. The soil, the rain, the clouds. Because you can't just have a tree. It's not a thing in reality. In our minds, yeah, sure, I can say, I'm going to go climb that tree. That makes sense. But for something to exist, in reality, not a chance. It has to be embedded in everything else. And so where do we start to draw the lines? We had this talk with the peacemaking thing. The lines that we draw end up being kind of arbitrary. They end up being kind of convenient for us, and inventions, actually. So, so where do I want to draw the line with a tree? Well, am I going to go all the way to, the light coming from the sun and all of the soil, and maybe, well, crap, what about the seedling, the seed that actually came from? Where the heck did this tree come from? Where's the other trees that were part of that system? Right? Was it from that family of trees over there? Those are pretty young, about the same age. Might have been something else. So now we're going back through time in our imagination as well, which gets really confusing. So, you see the problem here? The challenge? I thought I know what a tree is. It's right there, right? No, that's just a marker. That's a label, an icon for something. It's not it's not the whole story. It's not the complete thing. So in this kind of thinking, we have to be flexible. This is basically gets into systems thinking. It gets into that connective thinking, which is in survival and in these kinds of skills, primally, ends up being a much more viable way to look at the world. Now, I'm not saying we don't reduce things, and you're an engineer, is that right? Mm-hmm. We don't, of course we use that part of our mind too. That's how we make sense and problem solve. But the connective systems thinking aspect, that kind of, it goes into the connected and relational realm, actually becomes the dominant mode of thinking in primal living. Okay, it's actually the lead, and then we come in and we reduce things down to their parts and problem solve in that sense, kind of analytically, as a secondary feature. So, Western civilization, we kind of have that flipped. We generally lead with, a reductionist mindset, and we're kind of in that world, and then when we really need to, we get creative. Oh, problem. Oh, we better get creative here and try and solve this. Creative being the relational thinking, basically, lateral thinking. Okay, so, anyway, so this is kind of two things now. Everything is mystery, and leading from that perspective puts you in a certain frame of mind that actually integrates better with wild nature than with human-made constructs. Because inside of humanosphere, the world we've created, not the Earth, but the world we've created, has taken a lot of the guesswork out, right? When you flip that switch, the power's going to come on. Most of the time. It's amazing that it does. We have to think of all the things that we know and we can just trust. We don't have to like, they're not mysteries for us. They're taken care of, right? But living directly with the earth, there is a level of uncertainty, and especially at first a level of unfamiliarity that when we when we approach it from a holistic kind of systems approach, survival becomes a lot more easy, a lot more possible than, because we're just in a we have to be in kind of this creative problem solving space, dealing with new things instead of dealing with certain things. Now over time, you spend 20 years doing that, you get some, and you have a culture that does that. You go down the Amazon to some culture that's been doing that for thousands of years, well, they're right back to like, stuff's familiar again, so they don't have to live in the same sense of mystery. If that makes sense. So one of the things, part of the training involves kind of awakening this aspect of connecting, seeing, and thinking that makes room for mystery. Not just makes room for it, actually celebrates it, actually honors mystery, and allows it to be central, really. It's a humble way to be, too. If you just assume you're going to get a fire, like I didn't assume I was going to have a fire today. And if my life depended on it, that would be a very dangerous assumption. You're like, I'll have a fire, boom. But if I'm open to like, what does this fire need? What am I going to have to do to, what if this doesn't work? Right? All of those questions, which is that part of the mystery, then if I didn't get a fire, I'd just be sitting there shocked and freezing and die instead of creative and moving and doing the next adaptation. So, so mystery's fundamental, even though we more or less have stuff figured out. We don't. not all the way. There's certain systems we can know pretty well. Like there's probably a manual that came with your car, that the car mechanic knows every single detail about your car and can figure it out, but there's no way that single person could build your car. It's impossible for anyone to build a car. One person. Now, a whole bunch of people over time could build a car. It probably wouldn't look like that, but that's a result of a long period of processes, right? That, think of all the robots it took to make that car. You'd have to build robots just to make a car. Crap. Well, how do you mine the metal? Where do you get all that stuff? Yeah, no one can build a car. That's what I mean by mystery. It's like, we have all these specialists who know aspects of car, but we don't have one person who can just go out there and make a car. That's ridiculous. Maybe make a fire. So there's certain levels of primal technology that we can get to, one person walking the earth, or a small group of people walking the earth with no long-term infrastructure, right? And it looks kind of like you find all over the world, indigenous culture. It looks like simple shelters, simple tools, living close to the earth. That's what it looks like. But as soon as you start to specialize and build all of this infrastructure on top of infrastructure, and pass on generational knowledge, and do all this stuff, then we get really elaborate systems and tools like we have now. So, but it's still mysterious to us because none of us could do any of it by ourselves. Does any of that make sense? Cool. All right. So it's really important for this class because, I talk about that with most of the classes, but it's really important in this case because the very thing we're going to talk about the most is a complete mystery and will remain a complete mystery. We just may have a better what do you want to call it, framework to overlay on it so that we can make contact with it in a different way. Kind of like saying tree. For a 1-year-old, or when did they start figuring out labels? 1 to 2, somewhere in there. You know, it's important that we say tree because they don't know. They don't know any difference between tree and this and grass and everything, right? You have to point that stuff out. We talked about that in the peacekeeping class. That's part of our first years of development, is just learning how to constrain the everything that's overwhelming. So we're going to constrain the everything, constrain the mystery a little bit, because otherwise it just would sound like nonsense the whole time. But again, what I'm going to constrain it with isn't the truth. It's just a model of the truth, a representation. That's what models give us. A way to make contact with it. It's close, much like our eyes do with our environment, or our senses do. It seems pretty like, no, this is what's here. Totally. Not even close. It's a very different perspective if you are I don't know, Geiger counter. Or an X-ray machine. Right? You're getting or a bat. Very different representation of reality. So, I kind of want to stir up those assumptions a little bit, the way we frame our world, because it just is going to require that to get down this path a little bit. So, and you can pick up whatever frames you like and have when you leave, and they're just right there. You invented them anyway.